Good morning. As I ring the bowl this morning, may we join in gratitude for each other's presence here this morning and for the existence of this blessed community. Thank you, Michael. It was lovely. Well, good morning, members, friends, visitors to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. Although we may not share all the same beliefs, we are an intentional community gathered around our shared promise to support each other's individual spiritual journey and to inspire, inform, and support all who seek a more perfect and just community. I'm Nancy Holland, your service leader this morning, be joined with Reverend Sue in the pulpit, Michael Casey at the piano, and all the staff and volunteers as listed in your order of service that make our Sunday services possible every week. We are grateful to all of them. And we are glad that you are here this morning with us, whether in person or on our Zoom feed, as we strive to widen our circle and welcome everyone to the table. And I don't know if we have any kids today or not, but we're okay. We're always welcoming our children too when they can come. And this morning, Sue will talk to us about gratitude, generosity, and grace. And we have a couple of announcements. Let's see. Announcement regarding the Doris Scott Legacy donation. Please see the posters in the library and use a sticker to vote for your choice of how we might use this very generous bequest from Doris. That's from MQ and the board. Also from the social justice team, Brian Stevenson, founder of Equal Justice Initiative, will be speaking at no charge at the Chase Fieldhouse in Wilmington, Delaware, thanks to a speakers series from the Wilmington Friends School. That would be Thursday, November 30th from 7 to 8. And I have more information, the address, if anyone is interested. And lastly, also from social justice, The Social Justice Committee has felt that the first after-service lunch and discussion about saving democracy that we had a few weeks ago was very useful and well attended. And so they are offering yet another informal opportunity to go deeper into this month's topic. Let's call it Gratitude and Grace, or as David Brooks' recent New York Times opinion piece was titled, How to Stay Sane in Brutalizing Times. So please remain after the service. Join us in the sanctuary for a brief discussion and a bite to eat. There will be food available out there. And also there's no special outreach collection for November, but in December, we will of course be doing our holiday gift gathering for our families, referred to as from social service. So just keep that in mind as we move ahead. And now, join me in, Sue will read the chalice lighting. It's new words, different words in your order of service, so please join us.
Good morning. So now I end up with more stuff. So our chalice lighting words match the theme of our service today, words about generosity and sharing. I invite you to share in saying these words with me now. As we light this chalice with its freely shared light and freely shared warmth, let us be reminded of the many things that are freely shared with us and that we freely share with others. May we lean into generosity shared from the heart that can warm those around us. Thank you, Nancy. Our opening hymn is hymn number 128, and that is in your gray hymnal. Please rise. Papers up here today. Good morning. Good morning. So we're going to get a little brace yourself. So what is grace? Grace is getting more than we deserve. Grace is finding an unexpected moment of peace while taking a walk. Grace is learning something new and amazing about a friend you've had for years. We encounter grace when we hear a song by a group we've never heard that changes our lives, or when we make a difference, when we volunteer, we've signed up and shown up. Grace can feel like a wave of relief or even a spike of pain. Grace always leads us in the path toward more hope, more trust, more love. Grace is always around us. It's waiting to happen. Grace is patient and polite. Grace never imposes itself, and grace can surprise us, but it doesn't ever force itself upon us. As Unitarian Universalists, that's the Universalist side of our message. There's always more grace to go around. It's not something you just do by doing more good deeds. There's no magic prayer that we can just pray grace to come down on us. There's never a guarantee. We receive grace, not because we deserve it, but because the universe is fundamentally a generous place. It's not something we receive, but it's something we have the power to give. We have the power to be grace to one another. That was a reading from Chance Hunter from Grace Wins in the End. So as we think about that, as we think about grace as sort of that sense of generous spirit that is around us, that we don't control, we don't earn, but it's something in that fabric of the world that holds us. It's in that spirit I invite us into our time for reflection. I invite us to lay down our challenges, to breathe deeply. This moment of prayer is an invitation to be calm in the midst of the tumult of the world, to be calm in our overly busy lives, to bring together thought and feeling, mind and spirit, to find some center, some still point, some perspective, some sense of peace. It's here in this sanctuary, which has been home for so many, where so many thoughts and hopes and fears and desires all come together. We come together and are honest. May we be unafraid to face some decisions we've been trying to avoid, doubts and questions that have been easy to ignore, things we've tried to keep hidden, not just from others, but from ourselves. May we come together to discover there are resources within ourselves. May we feel that sense of grace. May we trust that we will receive what we need as we take a deep breath and do so together. Let's just reflect on that for a moment. Grace on a fall day like today is hard to ignore. Beautiful day, beautiful community. As we reflect, one of the ways we do come together is by sharing our personal joys and concerns. And Nancy will now lead us in that ritual that has long held this congregation together.
As Sue said, this is the time we reserve for the sharing of our joys and concerns. So if anyone has something they would like to share, please come forward and we'll light a candle.
I will go ahead and light the first candle for all that we continue to witness in the world. It's hard to put that into words, but somehow I think a candle and just a holding of time of witness matters.
I have a real joy, and that's being back with you again. I have missed you all. Let me kind of indicate how I came to be in this great community. Peter Tapke, you've seen his picture out there. He was chair of the philosophy department at Washington College when I was, and he was the one that drafted me in there. And he's the one that drafted me into the UUCR. He asked me if I would call Diane Shields about giving a talk on Buddhism, I think it was. So I said yes. And then after that service that day, I asked Peter, is she married? And he said, yes, she's married. I said, well, I'll have to forget that. And then about a year later, the same thing. And I said, is she still married? And Peter said, no. So I asked her if we could have lunch sometime, and we did, and here we are. So she brought me into this great community, really. Okay, so that's one part of it. And the other part of it is I've got a new hip, titanium, ceramic, and plastic, if you can believe it. And it feels really good, but I'm not quite all back there. But what I wanted to say in particular is that I had so many warm and beautiful cards and letters from so many of you, and they really helped me to do what I had to do in order to get better. So I have, over the years, have come to love this community and every one of you, even those of you who might be a little obnoxious at times. For example, Harry. And Harry sent me a letter that had me crying and laughing and weeping. And it was such, I would read it to you all, but I think he would be, I think he wouldn't like that, so I won't. Well, thank you, Harry, and thank you all the rest for all
Yep.
I have two things. One is my sister-in-law, Rebecca, in Florida, is the widow of my husband's brother. And over the years, since my brother-in-law passed away, his name is Larry, we've had intermittent contact, but they had two daughters and who have been in touch as well. Anyway, Rebecca had bypass surgery on Monday. So we've been texting back and forth, and she's had some up and downs, but I think she's going to be doing okay. So I've just been thinking about her and my relationship with her, and just kind of thinking warm thoughts. So I would light a candle for my Rebecca Warner. And also, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank John and Jane, who helped organize the service of remembrance that we did last Sunday afternoon. And also for everyone who showed up. It was very meaningful to remember the ones that we've lost in the last year, and to be together to comfort each other. And I hope it's something that we continue to do every year. Thanks.
Short and sweet, I just want to express my joy for being back in my Chestertown home. It's really, it's just makes my heart swell when I get to see all my friends from Chestertown again.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gail, and this is a remembrance of a dear friend of mine who recently passed. She lived here, she moved here because of me. I've known her, I know her for almost 50 years, and she lived close to me in outside of Chestertown, and it's left a real hole in my heart, missing her.
Good morning, everyone. Just last week, I signed an offer letter with a nonprofit, Leadership Maryland. I'm very excited to go on the nonprofit side of life. I did turn down some for-profit jobs. I'm so glad I did because that's just no fun, and this is a lot of fun.
I have, I guess a sorrow, definitely a sorrow and somewhat of a joy. My sister-in-law, Dick's sister Holly, lost her 15-year-old grandson to suicide this past week. And we went to the service and the vigil. And I think that the youth and the suicide makes it so much harder. Half the high school, there were 600 people at the vigil, and it's a terrible loss, but the gratitude for the outpouring from their community in support of the family has just been totally amazing. And the gratefulness of some of the students who spoke about how this young man, Tommy, had helped them in life. And if there's any grace in it, it was the ministers who said, we all need to remember to tell the people we love and care about how important they are, and not wait till something terrible happens. So tell all those people you love that you love them.
I think everybody knows that I lived in Israel as a youth, and the last month continues to be heartbreaking for me. But I don't remember the phrase he used, but Barack Obama made a statement this week about us all having the courage to embrace the difficult whole of this. And he mentioned, the massacre and the civilians in Gaza, and then just kept going back and back to so many different tragedies. And he just invited us to keep our hearts open. No one has a copyright on suffering in this situation. So as you go through your life in the next few weeks, it's not probably going to get easier, this subject. When you hear someone firmly on the other side, sure that they're right, remember this Sunday of grace. Give them grace. Let yourself be a little less sure that you are the only person that knows the right answer.
And for those joys and concerns that have been shared and those we may still hold in our hearts, may we have a moment of silence. Blessed be. And And as we care for each other here today, let us also care for this church, its missions and its programs, by giving as you can, for we are now the keepers of the flame. For the gifts generously given, we are grateful. And now if you would join me for a unison reading in your gray hymnal, number 562, entitled A Lifelong Sharing. Again in unison. Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. Whatever form we are, able or disabled, rich or poor, it is not how much we do, but how much love we put into the doing, a lifelong sharing of love with others. Now, Sue.
Okay, let me just get everything straightened out here. Move Nancy's stuff over a little. I really messed all this up today. Okay, we do have a beginning to this. So the reading we just did was by Mother Teresa. So what do we know about Mother Teresa and what motivated her? What gave her strength? And when she struggled, what happened when she lost faith? How did she persevere then? Mother Teresa was born, actually, her name was Agnes. She was born in 1910 in Macedonia, and she was part of a Catholic family. And I sometimes had always thought that she came from a poor family. Her family was actually more middle class. She came from some privilege, and she was exposed to some things. And she just knew she had some calling. And around age 18, she heads to Ireland. So she doesn't start in India. She starts in Ireland, and the religious order that she joined had a school in Calcutta. So now she heads at age 19 to Calcutta. And she didn't dive into just helping the poor and solving the world's problems. She taught for about 20 years in the school she was assigned to teach in. And partway through that is when she took her vows. The vows go through a series of stages. It was about 9 years into the journey where she took the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. She, though, somehow decided, because I think she had to be feisty to accomplish everything she did, she decided to push the hierarchy and tell them she didn't want to teach anymore. She went and got herself some medical training and convinced the powers that be that she could do something special in Calcutta. She lived among the poor. She learned She entered relationship, and some of the stuff I read are things that you could not even imagine doing for others. And she worked with a small group to meet her goal. And her goal was to help the unwanted, the unloved, and the uncared for. She was out in the street. She experienced poverty firsthand, and she saw horrors. But then, I don't know if it's but then and then, she started building capacity. Because I think her real gifts, as I've looked at this, is she was just sort of an MBA type, an organizational type. And she built schools and housing and healthcare and elder care. She figured out, what would a ripple do? How could I make this? How could I make all that I've learned over these years into something that mattered at a greater scale? She did fundraising. And as her fame grew, she went to the UN and beyond. We know she got a Nobel Peace Prize. And the other thing in this generous spirit that she had is she kept changing, including being willing to address AIDS and HIV as those needs grew. The group that she was a part of was the Missions of Charity, and by 1997, which is when she died, they had nearly 4,000 members, 610 foundations, and they were in well over 100 countries in the world. So it's easy to hold Mother Teresa up. It's easy to see her continuous focus on the other, but so much sacrifice, going there. Such commitment, but we also know she was human. She was controversial, and there's some times and positions she took that just don't match my faith. They would not match what I would think about birth control or divorce and where to draw lines. But that was part of her foundation, the values that she had grown up with. What I've been wondering this week is what grounded her generosity? There was one account that said that her father died when she was 8, and Agnes became really close to her mother, who was a very pious and compassionate woman, and she was very focused on charity. They weren't a wealthy family, but her mother extended an open invitation continuously to the city's destitute to dine with her and her family. And she said this to Agnes, "My child, never eat a single mouthful unless you are sharing it with others." That's how she counseled her daughter. And we've got to wonder if some of those messages we give our children really early about what sharing really looks like influences their life in that way. When Agnes then asked her mother, "Who are the people that we're eating with? Who are these people?" Her mother responded, "Well, some of them are our relations, and all of them are our people." So I think one thought I've had is generosity is cultivated. It's a way of being, and generosity is not a how much question. I think there's times we want to give away, let's say, the change in our pocket, or a coat that doesn't fit anymore, isn't the style, maybe it's worn, and we want to lighten our load a little bit and get rid of it. And that may be a really useful thing to do, but something there feels shy of being generous. It's what we have as extra, and we're getting rid of it. Maybe not a bad thing, but I think generosity has more to do with how we see the other and how we see the needs of other and where we connect our hearts to them. Generosity is not a how much question. Sometimes it is a stewardship, it is how much question, but it is more of a relational act. And it's a value as Unitarian Universalists we're going to hear more and more about over the coming year. I think folks have heard, I've talked about it, that we've got our 7 principles, and those don't need to disappear, but we are looking at sort of an update of replacing the principles as our core statements with some values statements, which pretty much encompass the principles. They put love in the center. I've shown some of the diagrams, and then they have the 6 values that go around the side. And one of those 6 values is generosity. And the words they use in the values that we're looking at adopting is generosity means that we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope We covenant, we promise to one another to freely and compassionately share our faith. So we're generous with our beliefs, our presence, and our resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. So that's one of the 6 values that made the cut. The other values that we hear about, we know that there are values of, I listed them someplace here. There are the other values of valuing transformation and equity, justice, and a few others. But one thing that's interesting is when they were doing this, gratitude didn't make the cut. There was a lot of discussion, is when you think of what are the values that are so important, should we also include gratitude? And the thought was gratitude is baked into generosity, but generosity is more how we live that out. It's more parts of how we see one another. The word that if you take away one word from the sermon that I'd love you to hear is, I think it's in generosity, we soften. We offer others connection by being open ourselves, and then we see the other not in judgment, but in a willingness to see possibility. It's not that others' needs are in competition with ours. We all have needs. We need to respect our own needs. We need to be honest about what those are. But generosity is more something that guides our path. It leads us to places of hope. UU minister Reverend Elizabeth Stephen reflects it this way: a simple change in perspective can revolutionize the way we move through life. If we instead of focusing on what we want, we can choose to focus on what we want to give. If that's our mindset, what do we want to give? I don't think it precludes practical considerations, and it does not preclude the love of ourselves and respect for ourselves. I think actually that's probably one of the big values. Can we soften in how we see ourselves to lighten up some, less self-criticism, more gentleness? And when we do this, maybe do we think more creatively? Do we get more imaginative? Do we see some little light out there that might be helpful? If we center generosity, it does begin in gratitude. When we do gratitude, some people here, how many people here have ever kept a gratitude journal or done something along those lines where you try every day to think about what you're grateful for? Often we start in gratitude thinking about the basics. We're grateful for food and shelter and heat. I know I'm often grateful for convenience, grateful for the labors of so many who make my life smooth, that make our lives go well. Gratitude for health care, gratitude for the colors and smells around us. It's, I think, in that gratitude practice that we start by seeing a little differently. We start by knowing in no way, no how. There's none of us here who have made it on our own. The idea of a self-made person is just not reality. And then we go to that next step. We soften and we see something a little differently. What is it that you might be able to give? At this point, now, today, right at this point in your life, what is it you have to give, to share? What do I have to share? Where can we share love? And then what form might that take? Because generosity, I think, comes up from within us. It's an impulse. Maybe it makes us happier, a little less tense. Maybe we can feel a different sense of belonging. I think Mother Teresa valued care, but she also had faith. I think of faith as trust in a future which could be better. And faith is never automatic. You may think you trust something, whether it is a certain way of looking at faith traditions or how you think about family and those around you. We trust and we ground ourselves in others. And I think it's important to think what it is that grounds you. What do you have when things get tough? Where do you find confidence in figuring out the next steps? Because sometimes that softer view just isn't there. We do get cynical or afraid. And generosity, that readiness to share beyond what we can take in, seems more than we can go. Where do we go when that trust in our bones just isn't there? I think we can return to gratitude, and sometimes we need grace. Simply put, grace is a gift. It's the pull towards something. It's a belief that something will hold us somehow. It will hold others. And a lot of times it comes in the noticing, the seeing of the light somehow, wherever that might be, that fresh way of seeing something that feels just impenetrable. It's a religious word. And it does have the same foundation as gratitude. And part of that is to believe somehow out there is enough for us all, that somehow we're gonna be okay, but we don't know what it might look like. The opening words I read, we hear that grace always leads us in a path toward more hope, more trust, and more love. I think as Unitarian Universalists, mostly that's about paying attention and noticing. I think when we get to that deep place, that centering place, call it prayer, call it meditation, call it something else, options that hadn't occurred to us come into some sort of focus. That waiting, that sleeping overnight and seeing it a different way. Sometimes grace comes when you realize there are others around you trying to help you. Sometimes grace is the courage to say, yes, I could use some help. It's not something we earn. It's not something that if we're better than others, whatever, we get more or less grace. It is just that amazing, fluid way that the world somehow is. If I think of the religious part here, grace challenges our illusion of control. We sometimes think, is life, just sort of all already laid out, and we're just opening the boxes and it's already determined what it is. Is it a faithful life, or is there free will, or whatever? Lots of good big questions. But the reality check is, no matter what choices we have, there's a lot that will come at us. And sometimes if we surrender control, it feels like a relief. Where is grace in your life? What is it you trust? Can you imagine relief? Because I think when we do that, life can feel a little less scary. It feels a little bit less that things are scarce. We just say we'll have to trust the next moment, and something will carry us. Something will notice. Someone will help us generously. And when we wake up that next day, asking the question, what can I give to myself, to others, we might find life's a little easier than when we ask the question, what do I want? May it be so, and blessed be. So that's some things to think about, some places to think about softening, in different places we can go. And we're going to sing our final hymn. And then in the discussion, I ask you to think about times in your life, if there's any really brief stories when you've felt grace, when you've felt grace in your life. And Nancy will help us lead through that discussion in just a moment. So our final hymn is hymn 404. It's in the gray hymnal, and it's What Gift Can We Bring? Please rise.
And now we have time, as Sue said, maybe for some thoughts, your own stories.
My mother's name was Grace, and I felt that she really grew into her name and blessed all of us with her grace and generosity. And when you were reading about Grace this morning, was so many of the things that she was. And I feel so blessed to have had that in my life.
I was going to say, this one left us speechless, huh?
My question was probably too specific.
I think my garden is the best resource for grace for me. And there's two things in particular. I keep trying to figure out, our piece of property is woods. Nobody ever tried to grow anything there until we built our house. So I have to figure it out. And that the birds keep figuring it out better than me. And maybe it's the squirrels, but I keep getting plants. What do they call them? Some people call them volunteers, and it turns out that phlox are really happy. And I would have never thought of it in a million years. And there's all kinds of other little ways, including the fact that Linda Dutton has way more hellebore than she wants. And she lets me drive up to her house when they're not even there and dig up her plants, because hellebore really like it where I live.
I'm conflicted by charity. Every day I get 3-4 requests for charity, and I find myself repelling from the concept. So I would like to have something worthwhile to give to, but I can't give to at all. So I've gotten a really negative attitude about giving at all. If they would only send you 3 or 4 times a year, but it's like every other week. So that's what I'm searching for, is something worthwhile to give to besides the UUCR.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, if we think of generosity, always happens in the context of relationship. We can have relationships with things we don't necessarily personally know, but we believe in the values in different ways. But if we think of generosity as how we live out our life, and if we're fighting against it, maybe that's not the place that we're called to. Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question to say, what am I called to give today?
So some of you know that I married into a very, very Roman Catholic family, and my brother-in-law, who is a missionary servant priest, was most generous and most graceful, where he was my advocate. So I did not have to convert. I did not have to sign my children away. Luckily, we didn't have any children, but I was pressured to sign them away. And he was always my advocate, saying that Marianne's a good person and she'll do the right thing. So that grace still sticks with me today.
Yeah, I guess my grace is I go up to the nursing home 4 or 5 times a week for about an hour to visit people. And there's this one woman, and believe it or not, her name is Mary Faith. So I see her more than I see anybody. But to see her eyes light up when I walk in that room, even if it's only for 20 minutes or half hour, I sit and talk to her or read to her. She has nobody else. And I feel good about that. You know, I feel that I'm doing something worthwhile, and it makes me feel good, and obviously it makes her feel good. And that's what I consider being full of grace today. So thank you.
I think we have financial generosity, and we have generosity of ourselves, what we give personally to others. Thank you.
I'll now offer, thank you, Nancy. I'll offer our closing words. I do invite us, because the discussion with lunch provided and stuff is also a continuation of some of these conversations with a little bit different slant that Linda and Marilee will offer to us. We'll have a chance to get coffee, and then they'll regather us. I'm going to extinguish the chalice today with the same word, or not extinguish chalice quite yet, but my closing words are based on our chalice lighting. As we extinguish this chalice with its freely shared light and freely shared warmth, let us be reminded of the many things that are freely shared with us and that we freely share with others. May we lean into generosity that is shared from the heart and that can warm those around us. We can now extinguish our chalice with our words that are in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Thank you all. Have a wonderful week, and we hope folks will stay for the conversation. Take care. Thank you, Nancy.